All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here. As one of our members mentioned to me out here in the lobby earlier today, I hadn't seen him in a while, and I said, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Glad you're here." He says, "Well, evidently, you guys have the answers on what's new in big box retail, so I came to figure it out." So obviously, with the panel that we have today, we do have the answers. So, or at least they do. So, looking forward to that. My name is Paul Ozzie. I'm your Georgia chapter president this year. So, again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Do we have anybody here from outside the immediate metro area? Where are you from? Albany. Augusta. Anywhere else? So, I don't know. I'm guessing Albany is a little bit further than Augusta. So I think Albany wins the Golden Steering Wheel Award, although you certainly get the Silver Steering Wheel Award. So thank you guys for being here. We are a Georgia chapter, so we cover the entire state, and we appreciate you guys coming from out of the metro area. And one of the things that we will be working on is trying to do stuff outside of our immediate metro region. We're working on an event in Savannah for the fall, so we'll keep you updated on that. In addition, we have Doug Sams with Atlanta Business Chronicle. He's here with us this morning. So, Doug and Business Chronicle, thank you for being here, which is obviously our premier real estate publication here in Metro Atlanta. So, thank you, Doug. In addition, I'd like to thank our 2014 chapter sponsors, in particular our platinum sponsors, Marcus and Miller Chap, Ackerman and Company, the Simpson Company, and Kitchens Kelly Gaines. Our silver sponsors are here on the banner here. As you go about your business, please remember our sponsors and use them whenever possible. Some upcoming events that we have. Next week, June 18th, is the Braves game outing with the Alabama chapter. And registration deadline is this Friday, so please get registered. That is a great event. It's very fun watching the Alabama bus pull up and see how capable they are of actually getting off the bus. But it's always a really good time. There's a tailgate that will be before the game, and then our venue is going to be the 755 Club. So it's a great venue where we can network and talk to each other, yet still be at the game. So please sign up for that. It should be a really good time, and that's next Wednesday. August 14th will be our next chapter meeting. We're not going to have a meeting in July, so you can go be on vacation with your kids. And that program is going to be a tech update, so that's always really popular. So put that on your calendar for August 14th. And then our next two classes coming up, for those that are new to CCIM, we have our CCI 101 class, which is our beginner class. That is August 25th through 28th. And then we also have 103, which will be September 8th through 11th. For those that don't know, the Georgia chapter here in Atlanta, we will present all 4 classes throughout the year. So you never have to leave Atlanta now to take all 4 classes and then eventually sit for the exam to get your designation. And in fact, we do 101 and 104 twice. So that's a huge benefit to us, and we're thankful for the Institute to allow us to do that. All right, that's enough on those. Again, our panel today and our moderator, we have Tosh Wolf from MIMS, John Burnberry from Shopping Center Group, Emil Gulia from Franklin Street, and Chris Hall from Haddow and Company. So really knowledgeable people, a lot of experience, and look forward to hearing what they're saying. So without any further ado, Tosh, take it over.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning. We have a fantastic program planned for you today. We have the finest minds that money could buy in retail real estate. And lucky for you guys, it's probably the best looking panel that you're going to see all year. Just like to take a minute and let each of these guys introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do. So, John, if you could just give us a elevator speech.
Morning, guys. My name is John Burnberry. I'm with the Shopping Center Group. I handle tenant representation for them, represent national retailers from as small as Chase Bank to as large as Dick's Sporting Goods. represent them throughout MSA Atlanta and across Georgia. And happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
My name is Chris Hall. I'm with Haddo and Company. Just to give you a little background, we're a real estate consulting firm. We are not experts in retail, but we bump up against retail in a lot of projects we're working on. We do a lot of work with developers, feasibility, and highest and best use studies, where retail is a component of a larger development. So we see it a lot. We have some knowledge of it, and it's going to be growing in importance as the in-town housing market takes off.
My name is Emil Gulia. I'm with Franklin Street, and I'm also a tenant rep broker, representing a lot of national to regional retailers, from New Balance to Cabela's, kind of in the size range. Our firm has got 60 retailers that we're representing right now across a platform of about 8 states.
Great, thanks. So just to give you a little bit of idea of the format here, I've pre-prepared about 10 or so questions for this panel to see if we can create some lively discussion, and then at the end, I'd like to open it up for 5 or 10 minutes of questions for the group. So let's get started. In the first question, Chris, I really wanted to direct to you, and you brought it up here in your introduction just a little bit, but there's an old adage of retail follows rooftops. So could you talk to the group a little bit about new development that you're seeing? Where are you seeing new housing stock, new apartment stock being developed within the Atlanta MSA, and where do you see additional growth and density?
Well, if you read the newspapers at all, or you drive down Peachtree Street, you know where the multifamily development's occurring. I mean, it's occurring in the urban core. There is obviously apartments being built in Cumberland and Central Perimeter, but the bulk of it is inside of 285, and particularly in Buckhead and the Midtown submarkets. We're just seeing a huge wave of apartment development. And just as a little point of comparison, last year at this time there were about 4,400 units under construction. Today there are over 8,000 apartment units under construction in the urban core. So it's really going to change the feel and the landscape of submarkets like Buckhead and Midtown, Decatur. But what we're seeing in terms of retail is previously retail, when a developer would come in and do a project, retail was typically underwritten at 0. It wasn't given much thought. Developers typically haven't been very good at doing urban retail that follows these projects. But I think today, retail's moving forward as you get more feet on the street in Buckhead and Midtown. Retail is going to be a much more important part of these projects. I think developers are going to pay a lot more attention to them, and it's really a value add, whereas in the past it really hadn't been a value add. A lot of, in Midtown and Buckhead, a lot of these places require ground level commercial uses. And it used to be developers would be, well, maybe I can put my leasing center on the first floor, I can put the workout place, maybe that'll satisfy the requirement. But now I think that retail is going to be a real driver in these projects. One example is a new project that's being built at the corner of Piedmont and Cheshire Bridge Road, Mill Creek Residential. They're doing a 300-unit project there, and the ground level of that is going to be a Sprouts, a 25,000 square foot Sprouts. And that deal wouldn't have happened if Sprouts hadn't have signed on, because of the rents they're paying and the value it brings to the project. I mean, it wouldn't have happened. So I think moving forward with the 8,000 units under construction, the retail is going to be a much more important part of these developments.
Excellent, thank you. Guys, it appears that when it comes to occupying some of these new projects, that both landlords and tenants are becoming more sophisticated in their analysis of the projects and determination of whether or not they go into the site. Landlords are evaluating tenants a bit more stringently than they were during the recession. It's no longer just about filling space, and tenants are using more robust means to select sites. What types of information, data, analysis, John and Emil, are you guys seeing from the tenant and landlord side in terms of this selection process, this occupancy process?
To Tasha's point, the analytics are really driving these deals. Retailers are extremely focused on surrounding sales in the markets, how other retailers are performing. I think what happened in the downturn was what they realized is we need to really make sure that we're making the right decisions with their investments. And with that being said, it's their best metrics for trying to gauge how they'll perform based on the surrounding retail in each particular market. So it more and more analytics, more and more mapping, more and more detailed demographics, socio-demographics, things of that nature that have gone into the process that I don't think existed 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, what I would add is the analysis on both sides of the table is really improved, and I say that from the standpoint that for my retailers, they want to know who they're dealing with, what their track record is, what their capital looks like, and what their resources are. And there's a lot harder questions of who's the landlord. In the reverse, it's the same thing with the landlords. I'm hearing a lot more of what's your retailer do? Tell me about their business. Tell me about their marketing. And the landlords are focusing, owners are focusing a lot more on who the retailer is and why they make sense for the center. The other thing that I'm seeing is that no one wants a story on why this is going to work. And I use an anecdotal example in Vegas. Landlord said, "Why don't you bring your retailer here? Let me sit down and explain the story." I said, they don't want to hear a story. If we can't figure it out by some quantitative metric, there is no story that's going to change things. The fundamentals of why, great sight lines, great traffic, great visibility, and great design and parking are key to making any deal today. No one's going to try to figure out this awkward space, whereas in the past, I think everybody was trying to figure that out. Everybody was trying to get to yes. So I think that it's just more about harder questions is what I'm seeing.
So is it fair to say then that there is less pressure from upper management in Wall Street in terms of opening a number of new stores and more about just getting the right location, the right store?
Yeah, I think so. I think the pressure is to do home runs every time, and we all know that games are not won by home runs. They're singles and doubles, but the ability for a real estate manager to push something through that is a single and double right now is really hard. No one wants to take the chance, and I don't think that's going to change for a while. I think that the pressure from Wall Street and what we've seen is going to continue. You're not going to see the massive rollouts of retailers like you used to.
Yeah. And I realize most of these national retailer decisions are made by committee, if you will. Are you seeing the committee process and the oversight process from a new store opening becoming more and more difficult to get through?
Well, nothing's easy. It wasn't that easy before. I think what's happening in committee is what John just said. There's a lot more quantitative analysis. And I can remember I used to work for AutoZone and going in front of committee, and they wanted to know the story of the neighborhood. And that's no one cares about that. I mean, we're grading our sites on 5 metrics, and we're looking at 6 demographic profiles, and those are A's or B's, or don't bring it in.
Right.
No, and I would totally agree with that. I mean, I think that there's still the pressure with Wall Street to perform based on what, their projected store openings are, but the committees are pushing back, and they're saying there's 1,000 Lawrenceville Georges out there. Why do we need to do it today? And I think that's a reoccurring theme that you're seeing. They don't have to open up stores, and if it doesn't make sense, they're not going to do it.
Interesting. Kind of the converse of opening stores, right? Since 2008, there have been countless store closings. Have we seen the last major round of these store closings, or do you expect further attrition?
I think that we're going to always see store closings. I think that there's less than 5 million square feet of store closings announced. In 2010, the same top 5 states that were openings were the same top 5 states, with the exception of Georgia being in there, for closings. And what that really means is I don't think the common consumer recognizes how many stores close just due to leases expiring. Family Dollar and Dollar Tree and Dollar General, who combined are opening 1,000+ stores, also close about 10% of that and within each of their portfolio every year, just because leases expire or relocations occur. So we're not going to have the mass wave of closings because I think that's beyond us. But there's certain categories, especially fashion, that we're always going to see it. And frankly, I don't know that it's not such a bad thing. It's like DDR's Project Accelerate. We're recapturing spaces that are underutilized.
And I would agree. It used to be store closings would be downsizing, and now it's right sizing. I think retailers with utilizing more and more analytics and knowing where their customers are coming from are realizing how large some of these stores trade from. And a lot of these stores are impacting others because they were growing and growing and growing and not realizing what the residual effects would be. And I think it's also healthy for the environment because it challenges other retailers to step up their game. And they're constantly having to evolve and adapt to the current conditions to compete with the marketplace. So I don't think store closings are such a bad thing.
So that's interesting that you touched on that, because where I have seen some store closings recently, it's not necessarily that the tenant is going out of business like they were in 2008, 2009, and you touched on it. It's a bit more of a right sizing, and I know just out here in the hall we're talking about different prototypes, different sizes of a couple of your retailers. Emil, is that a trend that we can expect to continue to see? Is multiple prototypes for each retailer and having those rolled out based on different market characteristics?
Yeah, it is. I only have one retailer that does not have multiple store sizes, and I think everybody is trying to adapt a store footprint to a market. The other thing that's happening is warehousing and industrial has gotten to be such a big part of retail that what used to be known as door to floor, which is the back door to get it on the sales floor, and no one wants that to stop in the middle, which is the back of house. You are seeing square footages shrink partly just because of inventory control, and more of it's being held at a distribution point. And then the other part of that is with what's happening in retail is the omni-channel presence. So you can't stock everything. You're not capable of stocking everything. If you want a pink New Balance shoe and all they've got is the blue, it gets shipped to you, and that comes from a shipping point. So, 5 years ago, Guitar Center, for example, had a 16,000 square foot store. We now have 3. Cabela's has got 4 prototypes, and they're all fitting into the market. And the other reason why they're doing that is they want to show that all their stores are productive. So the retailer is a lot more analytical about their per square foot performance.
In addition to the ability to change in size is also their ability to penetrate markets that they weren't able to penetrate before. Chris touched on the urban developments. For instance, we represent PetSmart, and PetSmart's prototypical size was 25,000 square feet a couple years ago. Now they've got a 6,000 square foot model that would go at the bottom of one of the developments he mentioned before. And it's that ability to adapt and that ability to change, and I think that's going to eventually result in long-term success for some of these retailers that are able to change and able to adapt.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, a good example is the Walmart urban market. I think it's a 40,000 square foot prototype, and just what John mentioned, they want to penetrate a market. Well, they can't do it with a 150,000 square foot store, so they've got to adapt to get into these markets where a lot of the buying power is, and these urban markets where we're building this housing. The millennials are the ones who are typically renting or living in these projects, and there's a lot of buying power there. So retailers need to be flexible if they want to capitalize on that.
Great. Let's leave the big box retail behind for a second and talk about some other uses in the retail arena. John, I know you and your team work with a handful of food service or QSR type restaurants, Chipotle, Pollo. Talk to us a little bit about how the restaurant business is changing, and are there any innovations or changes there that this group should be aware of?
I'll tell you, the trends are driving more and more towards the necessity to have drive-throughs. The customer base likes convenience. They like different points of access. I'm sure everyone knows Starbucks. Starbucks has a new prototype that's drive-through only, that doesn't have a dining room. And based on that, they're realizing that more and more of their transactions are being conducted, on the drive-through line rather than inside the store. And that's one of the changes. One of the other changes is, being able to adapt to not looking exactly like a Chipotle everywhere you go. And that's a challenge. And I keep going back to the urban environments because that's where a lot of the growth is right now. And it's the fast casual and quick service restaurants that are comfortable taking a risk and doing a site that might not look like a prototypical Chipotle or a prototypical McDonald's or a prototypical Panda Express. And I think that that's something that is changing. And, like I mentioned before with big box, if retailers don't adapt, they're going to be left behind.
Interesting.
I think another interesting trend is, and I'll use one example, is there's in downtown where our offices are, there's the Auburn Curb Market there, and it's an urban market, and there's a lot of small restaurateurs, and a guy who sells cheese, a guy who sells wine, and those can serve as an incubator for small businesses. For example, there was a Grindhouse Burgers started in Auburn Curb Market, and has now got a satellite over on Cheshire Bridge Road. And we're also seeing this kind of urban market format with Krog Street Market, which is opening up in Inman Park. It's going to be the same concept. They're going to have stalls that they're going to rent to people, and they pulled in tenants from out on Buford Highway, and they've really got a good mix of tenants. But it can serve as a little incubator to get people out and into a space that 5,000 to 6,000 square feet.
Although the urban market's important, there's 10 million people in Georgia and 6 million of them here in Atlanta. There's only 2.5 million people inside our perimeter, and I think that the urban core is where we're seeing a lot of density. I think that we can't forget that the trend that I'm seeing, and I only represent one restaurant, is the flight to quality is tremendous. You cannot walk into any restaurant and not see the focus on the food being a bigger part of what it used to be, a focus on a cool ambiance and coupled with the food. I think that Whole Foods and Sprouts and the like have done a lot to train the consumer about what they're taking in. And as someone that just left the urban core of Grant Park to move to East Cobb, I'm pretty surprised at what I'm seeing in food offerings, throughout the state, but also just outside the perimeter. I think that's the other thing that's going to continue. It's just anybody that comes on the scene, the quality is really, really high for what's being delivered.
Yeah, so I think I heard a couple of interesting things there. As landlords and as people making a selection in terms of who we would lease space to, from a tenant standpoint, it sounds like doing your homework and doing your due diligence about quality will be incredibly important because the consumer is just becoming more and more discerning. And then from Chris and John, I think I heard that there's two different aspects of the maturity of the retailer. Once you start to get into the Chipotle, Pollo, and more established company, there's going to be a heavier focus on, how do I deliver that product in a very efficient manner? And from Chris, it sounds like, when you're just coming out of the ground, if you will, and you're a new concept, being a bit more flexible and taking some risk and opening in a place that maybe has quite a bit of density, but not necessarily, the most convenient way to deliver the product is an opportunity. So as a landlord, I would think you would just have to decide what type of product you have and make a determination of who to go after, but make sure whoever you're going after has an extremely high quality product.
And that goes back to what I'm saying on my side. The landlords are, for the first time, I don't want to say the first time, like no one was paying attention, but more regularly people are asking the questions of, no, it's not just what's this look like from an NOI standpoint, but tell me about your operation. And I've just not heard the questioning from the landlords of who are you, like we have in the past.
Great. Another, I think, let's call it darling of the out parcel world, at least for quite some time, has been retail banking. But in my personal life, I've noticed the ability to take pictures of checks and deposit them. It seems like a proliferation of more ATMs. John and Emil, you both are working with two mainstays in the banking world, Chase Bank and PNC. talk to the group a little bit about the evolutions and technology and the banking industry and what we can expect to see going forward.
Well, to Tasha's point, you know, the majority of the transactions in the banking world right now are conducted either using your phone or driving through an ATM. It's the ease of doing business. The days of, you know, having a relationship with your banker are done. It's just it's not the way it was, and I think it's that there's more points of access. You know, if whether you're a Wells Fargo customer, a Bank of America, a Chase, or a PNC, the goal is to feel as if these branches are everywhere, and when you need cash, it's not like you're driving 10 miles to go to your nearest bank. You're driving a mile and looking across the street and seeing one of the competitors. And I think that trend is going to continue. I think you're going to see less bricks and mortar banking institutions and more drive-up ATMs and more easy points of being able to complete a transaction. One thing I've seen out in Texas is they're now developing ATM pads. And what they're doing is they're taking a quarter acre, a half an acre, and they're going to the banks and they're saying Bank of America wants to be here and Wells Fargo wants to be here and Chase, you better be here. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind. And I think in development, I think you're going to start seeing those more and more.
The banks have driven the customers away because they're trying to push the consumer to use the technology, and it is causing them to right-size their footprint. Last year, we were doing 4,400 square foot PNCs, and this year it's 3,000 and 2,500 square foot end caps. And, you know, they say that our bank says that the industry loses money on 50% of their consumers, which are the people that just walk in. And so they've eliminated a lot of humans, which is a lot of payroll. The teller is is a big expense. And what we're going to continue to see is that reliance on technology. PNC is creating cashless banks where you can walk in and there's one human there that can direct you to everything. And what that really means is you're walking in and looking at a screen and Skyping in with somebody in Pittsburgh, for example. They're outfitting some of their banks. There's one right now as a test in Atlantic Station, which is a shipping container, very much like the Starbucks on Terrell Mill. And we're going to continue to see that. We are, and the ATMs is a great point. You know, the ATMs have become a inexpensive flag to advertise their brand and also generate some fees because although I'm a PNC consumer, you know, frankly, when I need cash, I don't care if it's Chase or PNC or whoever it is, and that's not going to change. I think the part of the branding that's going on with the consumer is making sure that every consumer can find their brand somewhere. And what I mean by that, whether it be a billboard, whether it be an ATM, you want to know that your bank is that solvent that it's everywhere. And so that technology just shores up that experience.
John, the ATM pad sites that you were talking about, are those sites being developed for a single user, or are they trying to put multiple ATMs on the site?
If you were listening, I mentioned that it was for multiple users.
Thanks, John. I knew we were good friends. We talked a little bit about the urban infill development. Emil brought up the fact that there is a significant population outside the perimeter. You guys are obviously just back from ICSC. What types of development are being presented to you across the gamut, not just the urban infill development, which everybody's seeing, and then the sites that are being presented, what of those sites are actually achieving funding and are being fulfilled by the developers?
What I'm seeing is either really big developments, you know, we can look at the 3 that are going on in Atlanta. Those are the types of things, mixed use, that are getting funded, and really small developments. It seems like the neighborhood and community development is not what's getting funded right now. You know, let's use the grocery stores. So Sprouts is taking the chance and going in a lot of urban locations because, like Chris said, their footprint allows it. You know, if you look at Kroger and Publix, you know, Kroger's now doing their own development, so they'll build their own store, and I don't care how much more is around them. And Publix is still doing some smaller build-to-suits, but you're just not seeing any development that looks like what it used to. There's a couple reasons. One is footprints have changed, so it changes the square footage of GLA. The second one is there's fewer categories and there's fewer players in those categories. And I don't think right now the trend with, frankly, outlets and multifamily getting finance is going to shift that far into just your traditional shopping center for a little while. I mean, the mixed use is still a big proponent, and those are it seems like the three things that are getting funded. We look at a lot with Cabela's, for example, we look at a lot of really big projects, and it's lines on a page right now. I had a guy in my office yesterday for 180-acre development, and we're talking about 2017, 2018, and it is going to be that time period, I think, before we're going to start to see any real uptick in large centers that are not a mixed-use component.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we overbuilt the retail market during the last cycle. I mean, we worked on on a lot of sites in these outlying communities, Alpharetta, Lawrenceville area, different places, and you would drive down major roads, and you would just see strip centers that were vacant that had been taken back by the bank. So I think there's probably still an overhang of retail space, and I would assume that a lot of lenders probably got a bad taste in their mouth from that, and now they're being very selective in what they finance, and you've got to have a really strong sponsor on these deals. And the three things that have gotten financed, which are obviously not suburban models, but Ponce City Market, Buckhead, Atlanta, and Avalon, all have extremely strong sponsors who have deep pockets, and they also have great track records, and the concepts are, excellent.
And match the market. I mean, they're very, very market reflective if you look at each one of those. And that's not going to change for a long time. I think we're going to get back to that.
Presumably, one of the things that would be impacting the number of projects coming out of the ground and the number of projects getting financing is the idea of the internet and distribution companies such as Amazon. And I think it's pretty well known the impact that that's having on sticks and bricks retail. But the buzzword that I keep hearing is experiential retail. I think that if you've looked at any of the marketing materials for Avalon and some of the other the larger projects, Jamestown's project at Ponce City Market, et cetera, there's certainly some of that experiential element to it. From your guys' standpoint, what is experiential retail?
Retailers are battling existential factors, and that being e-commerce, and that being replacing the convenience of shopping on your couch with a box of popcorn and your TV on. And that's why the word experience keeps being used, because it used to be where you went shopping, you went to go buy a T-shirt or a pair of shoes, and then you got back in your car and you went home. And to Tasha's point, what these developments like Avalon and like Atlantic Station are pushing is this being an activity for your family and going out shopping. In addition to going out shopping, you may catch some sort of a music act or a juggler or a festival or something of that sort that's keeping you in these shopping centers and keeping money being spent. So it is that experience, and it is the challenge for retailers to continue driving the traffic to their stores versus the ease and comfort of shopping at home.
I would add to that although experiential retail is an important part of it, and the e-commerce platform, although it's growing at 35%, it's 11% of retail sales. Retail sales in America is $4.5 trillion. And although we're growing on retail sales at 4.5% to 5% long term, there's still such a tremendous need for the bricks and sticks, because you can sit on your couch and shop, but you still are looking to touch and feel a product. And if you get away from the price point where you're buying, Walmart everyday low prices, and you're buying something for a reason, which is the other cultural shift that's occurred. You're no longer shopping for entertainment. You're shopping for a reason. You're going to a wedding. You're going fishing. You're going to go play golf. You're walking in and you're expecting a value proposition that's much, much different than it used to be. And that experiential retail is coupled with the omni-channel presence. And I use that, like I said, with New Balance. New Balance cannot in a 2,000, 2,500 square foot store, which is only carrying their brand, you can't carry every size and every color. But if you're shopping at Big Peach, for example, for running shoes, and you want to try other brands, you're going to go over to the New Balance shoes, try them on, listen to someone tell you about it, and that fulfillment exercise which is getting that product, is also part of that experiential retail. And think of, if you go to Nordstrom Rack, for example, and you're buying, and there's a huge line, someone will pop up with a tablet and say, I can help you right here, where you're standing. Apple products, they kick out the receipt from the bottom and they're going to ship it to you. So experiential retail is also about that fulfillment exercise, and as you, the consumer, the value proposition is being delivered.
Interesting. I think it was in the last Atlanta Business Chronicle, there was a article that said MARTA is about to send out a request for level of interest for transit-oriented development around their sites. And I think the article really focused more on residential, but from a retail standpoint, are you seeing retailers interested in being in or around transit-oriented development? And I guess I would take that one step further just to say, is that if you are seeing that, or is it confined to MARTA predominantly, or are people starting to pay attention to the Beltline here in Atlanta?
I think that the retailers, and I don't represent retailers, but I think it's common sense that they would want to be near MARTA stations, because like you say, they're densifying these MARTA stations with residents, but you also have all the people that are coming and going from MARTA stations every day in these parking rides, and it's got to be convenience retail. But what's more convenient than getting off the train and picking up your dry cleaning or grabbing a jug of milk on your way home? I just think that there's so many people coming in and out of these locations that that retailers would want to be there, and they're only going to get, the MARTA stations are only going to get more important as Atlanta continues to urbanize. And so I think that that's a real opportunity.
Okay.
I think with any urban transport, what we're going to continue to see is service-oriented around them. If you think about our love of cars, the consumer that is on a MARTA line is changing and becoming higher end, but there's still a tremendous need for that service orientation of everyday traffic, grocery, haircuts, things you can't get on the internet. If you look at a more mature city like Chicago and the L, you are only now beginning to see, I say only now, in the last decade or two, you're beginning to see a trend away from all that service orientation. And, like you said about jug of milk, you're going home and you're going to only grab what you can carry on that walk. That's the other thing about it, is that you're not going to see, call it big boxes or big purchases, because it's only as valuable as what you can carry away with you. So I think Atlanta, and especially the Beltline, we're going to see, the Beltline's going to turn into, I think, a huge incubator, and Grindhouse is a good example of because you're seeing pop-up retail that will turn into something different in the larger store. But that's going to be the big challenge with all of this. Any urban transportation is just, you can't take more than what you're going to carry. You no longer have that car to, in most cases, to load up in.
And I think to combat that factor that Emil said, which is a very good point, would be more residential growth around these MARTA stations, so that you could combat the need for being able to only grab what you can carry. With the exception of a couple stops, these MARTA stations are kind of in the middle of nowhere from a retail perspective. Retailers like to be around other retailers. So if you're going in there, most retailers don't want to take the chance of being on their own. And I think that that's a challenge, because it takes a catalyst to create that marketplace, to create that trade area. And unless you've got multiple users that kind of band together to take that risk together, we're still a long way away from that. Most retailers want that traditional shopping experience, and being at a MARTA station or inside a MARTA station in Atlanta in 2014, it just doesn't exist.
Interesting. So we've talked a lot about what retailers are looking for and some of the trends in retail now. This group, for the most part, I don't believe represent retailers, but they would love to have some retailers potentially in their developments. Please tell the group a little bit about how they can best present their sites and, candidly make your guys' job easier in making a decision to locate a retailer there.
The advice I'd say is do your homework. You wouldn't believe how many developers call us about a site for a location for a Chipotle, for example, when there's a Chipotle right next door. And I laugh because it's the easiest thing in the world to look at a map and say, here's a void and here are the retailers I'm going to go after as a result of that void. Retailers have trade areas. They have they don't tend to enjoy impacting their stores. So I'd say do your homework. I'd say know what makes these retailers tick. Know what a certain retailer is looking for. So if you've got a site that doesn't make sense for them in a million years, don't present it to them. That's what I'd say. I'm sure Emil's got more to add.
No, I think that's a great one. The other thing I would add is no one does the hard ones. So, we are inundated with packages, and no one really needs a 15-page package or a call. Hey, let's go on the phone and talk about it. The summary of 2 or 3 pages, if you can't put something in a succinct format in 2 or 3 pages to get the point across with, shiny lights and bright pictures, then there's a good chance you're going to struggle with presenting that product all the way through the entire life cycle of that product. The number of packages that I'll see, Dollar Tree is one of our retailers, and obviously PNC, of a guy that owns a PNC site, and I mean that from the cost, and will say, hey, I think this is a great site for Dollar Tree. There's, Dollar Tree can't even get 20% of that cost. So there's been no analysis on one's behalf on why the retailer makes sense for that location. And that really just comes back to homework, but it also comes back to putting some thought into something more than what's that NOI look like. You gotta understand why you can build that NOI or why you can build that value. So I think the homework is key, but it's also about a succinct package because no one's got time for a 15-page document right now. The cursory first glance is what people need to get started. We can hear the rest of the story later.
So with the proliferation of information technology, I'm certain that there's a place where developers and landlords can go to find, call it the 5 or 10 bullet points that you spoke about, Emil, that they could put on a 1 or 2 pager. Where would you typically tell people to start in terms of looking for that information?
We get posed with developers that say, okay, if we could get Dollar Tree or Cabela's or somebody else, who else would come in here? And I hate to say it's not rocket science, but what I will do is say I'd go to let's use Jamestown. Go to Jamestown and look on their website and see who's in their projects. Frankly, it's just not that hard to go out there and look at other people's packages and other people's shopping center groups. Are a great example. The packages their landlords put together, or the landlord packages that are put together by shopping center, they're typically 2 pages, maybe 3 with the site plan, and it's got key bullet points. We don't have to recreate the wheel, any of us. And another example of that is fast food guys will kind of cluster around each other. When a new retailer comes to the market, we've started doing, based on that category, we're doing dot densities for the category. So for example, big box will say, let's do a dot density of big boxes. No names, it's just the dots. And you can look at that visually and say, this is where the regional locations are. Well, that same example kind of goes forward with putting together packages. Go to where other people are doing it and go to the website. Just spend the time there. I hate to say you're ripping off another person's idea, but so did that person. We've all evolved, and there's nothing the matter with improving the mousetrap because you're not going to really recreate it. You're just going to improve it. I think the cycle or where we are with the development is just too mature to think you're going to do something that's so outstanding that no one else has seen it before. There's interesting projects, but they still hug the same components. And like I said about the Ponce to Atlantic Buckhead to Avalon, those are very, very market reflective, not just in the retailers that are there, but also in the architectures there and then the design. You could not, even if you had a brick building out in Avalon, I don't think you could fill that thing like you are in Ponce if it wasn't in town. And if you look at what Ponce is, you can look across Jamestown's platform and say, guess what, they've done that before. So it's not going to be that hard to kind of replicate that, and that's what I think a lot of people need to be looking at when they're trying to, dole something out and present it.
I'd like to add on in its most simple form. You wouldn't believe how many emails we get where there's a site plan that's, drawn on the back of a napkin.
Yeah.
When we're presenting these, sites to real estate committees in San Francisco or New York or LA or Chicago, we're telling this story. And the more help we can have from landlords in putting together a true, concise, and accurate site plan, the better. In addition to that, we mentioned the required analytics. Just knowing how your shopping center is doing, knowing how the retailers are doing in your shopping center, knowing how the market is doing. Talking to landlords in your area and trying to get an understanding or an idea of the success of the retailers. Knowing the growth in some of these local markets, knowing the major employers, knowing what's driving the traffic, the sales. Between brokers and landlords, it's really a partnership. It should not be an adverse relationship. It should be a partnership. And really, it's a partnership between the brokers, the retailers, and the landlords. And really, what you're combating is the real estate committees. Yeah. Because you're telling this story about what's going to drive a successful store. These guys are going to try and tell you why it's not going to be successful. And the more help we can have from landlords who are as subjective as it gets, the better. We're all on the same team. We're all going for the same thing.
Great. So based on the topic of the entire discussion, I have to ask the last question. But in order to keep enough time open for audience questions, let's see if we can answer in one or two breaths. What does retail look like in 2025?
Much smaller footprints. I think the trend of smaller footprints is going to continue. I think you're going to have more and more spoken wheels type scenarios where you've got points of distribution within close proximity to the retail outlets. Same day shipping is more and more important. You don't need to pay retail when you've got an outlet that's a mile away that you could drive a truck to that store or to someone's home just as quickly as they could take the product with them, put it in the car, and take it home. So I do think you're going to see smaller and smaller footprints.
I think, not to beat a dead horse, but I think it's going to be more of the experiential retail. That's who I think the consumer is going to be in 10 years. You've got the millennials, and that's where they put a premium on that type of retail experience. And I don't really see that changing. And I think that you're going to get more specialized retailers because I think that having a product and having a really good product demands some sort of specialization and expertise. So I think you're going to see a lot of new retailers pop up who can cater to this market and have a real specialization and not try to be all things to all people.
Yeah, and dovetail on that, in addition to the footprint, the all things all people is one that I think you're going to see, and that is the category killer is not dead. There may be some struggles with books and office and electronics and toys, but you are not going to see the proliferation of mass merchandise and general merchandisers. A couple of years ago, I was with Jones Lang LaSalle, and Dyson decided that their distribution points in Home Depot and Lowe's were not conducive to the shopper that was going to spend $500 on a Dyson. So they decided they were going to start rolling out some stores, and I think you're going to continue to see consumer brands that the brand itself is strong enough and it becomes a store. Under Armour could be an example. New Balance is an example. So there's one of our retailers is Guitar Center, and there was an article about Guitar Center that said, is the category killer dead? And it used Guitar Center because they're the only real national music chain, and the answer in summary was no. So you're going to see smaller footprints, you're going to see more specialized brands, and I think you're also going to see an adaptation to getting out of your car a little bit more, because with where we're going with our urbanization, you just cannot rely on your vehicle. So, and then the final thing is just there's going to be so much more technology involved in your retail experience. If you are not buying on price, if you do not have an electronic format to reach the retailer, and that includes in the store, walking around with a tablet, I don't think you'll be around outside of the merchandisers. They're carrying price alone. Think of paper products. I don't think you'll be here.
Great. Thank you. First question.
This question is for John. Can you comment on Dick's and Publix up in Delano by the outlet mall? And secondly, how are owners re-tenanting, repositioning the vacant big boxes?
Can't comment specifically on Dick's. I'm assuming you're referring to Dawsonville. There are a couple developments that are adjacent to the outlet mall across the street from one another. Right now, they're trying to get Kroger to relocate from down the street. I believe across the street they've got Publix that's committed. As far as Dick's, they have not made a commitment to that market yet.
How do you re-tenant a vacant grocery store or a big box in general? You work with a lot of shopping center owners. How are they repositioning a 40 or 60,000 square foot lot?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you that the major challenge with re-tenanting a grocery store is the shop space. Because the shop space is where the landlords and you guys are making all your money. And when a grocery store goes out, the nail salons and the hair salons, need that sort of traffic generation. And the retailers that are able to backfill those types of spaces are value-oriented retailers. It's the retailers that don't have an opportunity to go into other first-generation shopping centers. We represent Ollie's Bargain Outlet. I'm sure you've seen a couple of Ollie's pop up, Big Lots, Value Village. Those types of retailers, Burlington, are backfilling grocery-anchored shopping centers. But the challenge, I think, is still going to be the small shop, because the sales that these tenants that are backfilling these spaces generate are a fraction of the sales that a Publix or Kroger is going to bring in. And as a result of that, these small shop tenants don't have nearly the foot traffic that they need. So I really do think that's a challenge, and I feel for landlords that lose that grocery anchor.
Yeah, I might just add one thing to that. I think it is a big challenge to re-tenant those vacant grocery boxes like that, because as John said earlier, retailers want to be around other retailers. So in your traditional grocery anchored center, you have the one grocery box. So you're out there looking for a tenant who can presumably go in by themselves with a handful of shop space and operate and be successful. So you have to get very creative in order to find the type of user. And what we found is it's a non-traditional user typically.
I'll tell you what I would recommend in terms of moving forward is, with these developments, when you're underwriting them, underwrite them for less shop space. Because, at the end of the day, retailers leave. So if a retailer leaves and you're building a 150,000 square foot Kroger center, if that Kroger leaves, what are you going to be left with? And I think that that's something that you need to analyze before and after you do that deal with Kroger or Publix, because there's always that threat that there's going to be new development down the road, and that's where the shift is going to happen, and you're going to be caught with I was going to say with your pants down, but I don't know what kind of crowd this is. but that's kind of what it is, and you're left in an awkward position and in a tough spot.
I'd add one thing to that, and when you're talking about chopping these boxes up, and I know this group comes from the owner perspective, and we kind of represent the occupier perspective. When you're looking at these centers and thinking, hey, I can buy that for well below a replacement value, and I figure I can underwrite it for well below market, what I'd offer to you is look at the design of that box, because so many of these boxes, Walmart's a great example, are big boxes, and you think, well, I can chop that up, but you're not accounting for, I'm not saying you're not, one does not account for the frontage and how much is there, because no one wants a bowling alley. And that is one of the biggest challenges, chopping these boxes up. I sold 24 Krogers 3 years ago, and of those vacant Kroger boxes, and they were all 40 to 70,000 square feet, the reason was, by and large, either the trade area had shifted to where it turned negative, and or the store no longer fit a footprint that they could renovate and be efficient in. And we would sell these things, and I can say that honestly, 20% of them turned into another retail use. The bulk of the rest of them became a church, a Strayer University, or something like that. So it's the investor always looks at this and say, I can buy this for under replacement, I can market it for under market, and it doesn't quite turn out that way, because the inherent design of that center and the trade area has shifted so much that they've become tough to deal with. And the grocery is the primary example I'm using there.
Yeah, excellent point, and we've seen that as well. We've had a couple of old grocery boxes where you've got to peel the front off of it completely, add new storefront glass, add multiple entrances, split the utilities, demise it, et cetera. And, you know, when you've got a $5 to $6 gross rent payer that will occupy it once a grocery store leaves, it makes it very, very difficult. Next question.
John and both of you talked about the market outside of Atlanta and smaller footprints. John, I asked you, were you surprised that PetSmart came and did a small town store in a town as small as Waycross?
And Les is mentioning a specific deal that we just completed with them where PetSmart is taking 6,000 square feet in Waycross, Georgia, and they're the only player in town. And I think what you're asking is, why would they not go larger? Because of the lack of competition. And I'll tell you that the challenge for that model is that they're still in the experimental phase. These retailers don't know how the market's going to react to these smaller footprints. They don't have the success history that, or I'm sorry, the sales history that would make it so that they would take a larger risk in a market like Waycross. Before 2014, I think if you asked a retailer like PetSmart, would they ever consider a market with 50 to 55,000 people in the trade area, and they'd probably tell you no. And I think what's happening is now with their 6K model, they're able to penetrate a market they might not have penetrated before. And it's less of a risk going in 6,000 square feet than it would be taking 25.
Something to add to that model that I didn't mention is, only the retailers that really understand who their consumer are the ones that will take the chance on doing a smaller footprint, because they can define exactly who that consumer is. I like Sprouts. We just were in Austin and we're looking at a bunch of new Sprouts, but I had asked someone I know, who's the Sprouts consumer. I asked a Sprouts real estate manager, who's the Sprouts consumer, and they said everyone. I think that's not anybody that says that. I think there's a concern there, because Sprouts, although it's not tested in this market, it's certainly tested. But to use Sprouts, you're still going to probably make an additional shopping trip because you can't get it all there. And the retailers that are taking the chances on these boxes that are smaller really understand exactly who their customer is and can whittle that down to say, hey, I've got 55,000 people in my trade area, but X percentage of them are my consumer. No one looks at, exclusively what's the income, what's the education, what's the ethnicity, what's the trade area size. Those four factors were traditionally driving the big power centers and were making everyone take the chance, so to speak, are not going to be what gets you to the next level of backfilling or filling any project.
And also, the size and the market that you go into is a reflection of the sales projection. So if you're quantifying a market and you're saying that there's $6 million in sales in pet supplies, you may take a larger risk rather than going into a market like a Waycross, where you're saying that it already has, the demographics are much lighter than your prototypical store and prototypical market. So therefore, if we only need to do $2 million out of a Waycross, Georgia location, that's great, versus going in 12,000 square feet and needing to do $4 million to justify that size.
Great. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. Yes, sir.
In addition to Sprouts, are there other exciting or interesting retailers coming into the market or homegrown that you can mention for us, talk about?
Yeah, there's two. We have two that are going to roll out in fall, and they are both private equity owned retailers. They're both sub 200 units. The interest in private equity and rolling out brands is pretty strong. I don't want to mention who they are just yet. We're still putting together a strategy for that rollout. We are seeing, Home Goods, TJ Maxx, and the TJ brands, Ulta, Five Below, Sprouts. Those are all, and excluding the dollar stores, those are all pretty strong, and they're all they're executing fabulously. But the waiting room is pretty deep for those retailers, so everyone is trying to figure out who's going to be the next wave. And it's probably, I think, a good thing that so much money is sat on the sideline. People are trying to figure out how to deploy it, and if you're not going to get those yields in real estate, a lot of these private equity funds are, buying retailers. One that we really like, we like what they're buying is Cateron. They're out of Denver, and if you go to their webpage, they rolled out blooming brands and edible arrangements. They've got a pretty good track record, and there's a dozen of them out there that are buying up these brands that are 20 or 40 stores and putting some wheels behind it, bringing it to scale. I think you're going to continue to. That's going to be your wave. Figuring out who that is before they're here is the tough part. The one that I'm talking about, based in one of them is based in Denver also, and they're covered up in the West. And we decided what we were going to do. My team, as we went to Denver and Austin and Dallas, and we said, who's out here that we don't have in our market? And a lot of them were people we'd seen before, meaning retailers we know. Whataburger strikes me as one. We eat there every year in Vegas, and yet we've never called on them to see, why they haven't made it to Georgia. And it was more of a reminder. But we saw a lot of new brands. Hollywood Feed out of Memphis, that's a 25-store chain of organic pet supplies. They're doing a really good job, and like John said, they're testing their footprint. They've got 2,000 square foot units. They had 6,000 square foot units. The closest they are here is in Huntsville. They got 2 units in Huntsville. But it's a 25-store chain that's trying to achieve scale, and if we hadn't have just gone to some of these markets and see who's there, I don't think we would, really have these two that are in the works. We wouldn't have them. Because you got to call these folks 2 and 3 years before they're in your market.
John?
I think you're seeing more and more consolidation. You're seeing a lot of consolidation in the medical world. I don't know if you guys heard the recent news, but Well Street, who's a client of ours, was just merged with Piedmont. And now it's Piedmont Urgent Care by Well Street. And what Well Street realized is, why not tack onto a brand that's already recognized, known, and trusted? You're seeing consolidation in the office supplies. Office Depot and Office Max decided, why not join forces and go up against Staples rather than having 3 players fight it out. I think what you're also seeing is consolidation of restaurants. You're seeing more and more larger companies that are buying more and more brands, and they're these massive conglomerates of brands, and they're diversifying their investments. What I'm concerned about is more and more franchisees and more people that are getting into real estate that aren't knowledgeable about real estate because of the money on the sidelines and because of the ease of access. They're buying into these brands that they're already set up. They already have the infrastructure, and all they need to do is cut a check. And the franchisors are pushing growth, and they're pushing growth that might not be as calculated as we'd like to see. But I am seeing a trend of consolidation more and more.
Excellent. John, Chris, Emil, thank you. Excellent job. Fantastic information. We appreciate it. And on behalf of these guys, thank you for giving us the opportunity to stand up here this morning and, share our craft with you.